All right, Jets FM on EOF Fan returns for this Wednesday, the 30th of October, 2019, brought to you by ourlads.com, providing the best depth charts for both pro and college football on the net. And, of course, also great scouting for college football. Can't wait for the East-West Shrine game. We're going to have a lot of coverage there once the college football season's over. And obviously gearing up towards the NFL draft, which unfortunately, again, is going to be a big focus for us, which is why I'm announcing that now that the trade deadline is over, we're going to go on hiatus for a couple of weeks. We're going to see how we're going to play around with how things go from week to week, story to story, game to game, on whether or not something impacts the teams extremely important enough to talk about it. Otherwise, all last year, including the offseason, we spent all of our time talking about the draft and rebuilding. And then one game basically into the season, everything went down the tubes with the injuries, and those are things you can't control. And that's why I'm just not going to go back under that cycle again, because we're going to have more than enough time towards the end of the season and in the offseason to once again talk about free agency and specifically the draft. But it was a very eventful week for the New York Jets.
I would call that a mild understatement given what happened yesterday. I mean, I think I joke around, and Greg and I are both hockey fans, and we talk about Rangers Twitter in New York having a panic attack when something happens. Well, I would say that Jets Twitter was in a wee bit of a panic yesterday, probably at about 12 o'clock when the news broke that Adams potentially could be on the block. You and I both talked about Robbie Anderson being a guy that we could trade. The news that Douglas had only two untouchables, be it Darnold and Quinnen Williams, the Leonard Williams trade earlier in the week. But I think the possibility of both or either Jamal Adams getting traded and Le'Veon Bell getting traded clearly sent Jets Twitter into a mild panic, and that's probably putting it mildly.
Yeah, and a lot of what took place over the last 24 hours has to do with the age we live in, instant impact of social media. And unfortunately, there are young players, immature players, like Jamal Adams, that have to learn the hard way. It's just not how you handle situations like this. And I'm sure he'll get together again with Joe Douglas and Adam Gase and maybe even the owners and have a long discussion. Sorry, Ryan Clark. I lost a lot of respect for him. I don't need to talk much about how the Jet beat writers will always come up with a story to have a story. Like this came out of, let's see, what was it? The New York Post. Talking about the Jets and Jamal Adams marching towards an ugly divorce, and a little part in this about how Joe Douglas said while he listened to offers on Jamal Adams, the Jets did not actively shop him. Sources inside the NFL support his claim, but really, it is a game of semantics. If they had no interest at all in trading Adams, they would not even field calls. And Ryan Clark picked up on this, and I'm sorry, both these guys don't know what they're talking about. They just don't. If you are a really good general manager in any sport and somebody calls you about any player, you're always going to have a reason to find out, okay, even though I'm not trading this guy, what do you think? What's the market? What's the outside of this building? What do they think about my superstar player, which I'm not trading unless they give me a Herschel Walker deal? What's that kind of what's out there that I'm not privy to? And you'd be not doing your job if you just, according to Ryan Clark, hung up the phone. As soon as somebody asked if Jamal Adams was, just absolute stupidity by Ryan Clark and anybody that thinks that that's the way that Joe Douglas should have handled that.
So I'll tackle a couple of things. First, as you know, perception is always greater than reality, right? And if Adams, as he said, went to ownership and went to the GM and went to the coach and said he wants to be a Jet, right? If news then broke stating that Douglas was actively seeking to move him, I can understand Adams being upset at it, right? And I can understand the comments that Adams made. Douglas's job, however, then is to mollify his superstar and say, look, I didn't call anybody, right? I know he came out publicly and said it, but I think he also needs to have the private conversation with Adam and say, look, I did not actively seek to move you. People called me. I gauged the interest level. I gauged how much the return might be for you, even though that I have no intentions of moving you and want you to be a Jet. That's a different story than if the viewpoint that came out is that Douglas was actively moving him. And that's the way, as you said, the reports came out. With Bell, when you and I both know that Adam Gase really did not want a part in Le'Veon Bell in any way, shape, or form. Bell has been a model guy.
Said? He didn't want
I don't
to
think
part
Gase.
with him?
I don't think he wanted any part of him.
We don't
not
know
two
that.
part.
We don't know that.
Well, again, per what came out, it doesn't appear
same people
right.
Who were saying this,
Fine.
so I'm not going to believe any of that. But go ahead.
The one thing I will say, though, that you and I are think maybe a little bit surprised at is just how good Bell is in the room, right? So, so all the stories that came out of him in Pittsburgh of being a divisive factor, similar to AB, and basically clicks and not necessarily fitting in. And part of this could be lip service, and part of this could be him trying to change his image. But he has said nothing that would make you believe he doesn't want to be here, which is smart.
Yep.
He has tried to be a leader. He has preached patience. He has said he is on board. He very easily could go off because, honestly, his numbers are getting impacted. He's getting paid. But as you know as well as I do, right, the NFL stands for not for long. It's a year-to-year league. After next year, they could easily get rid of him, right? And maybe he gets a big contract and maybe he doesn't. But he has done everything possible to show that he wants to be here, which is what you want to hear from the guy. He didn't have to do that because he's got guaranteed money coming in. So on the one hand, very happy to hear what Bell said. On the other hand, I can understand where Adams is upset. I can understand maybe where Adams maybe slightly went over the line, but he is a leader. He is a guy who you build around. He is a guy, and I can understand part of it is the frustration of the record that they've had and the poor performances that they've had ever since they drafted him. And granted, it has proved to be a much longer process than expected because you and I both came into this season with, I wouldn't say sky high expectations, but much better expectations than clearly a year before based upon all the moves they made. And what we've seen so far is there is some dearth of talent on this team that has to get remediated. And hopefully Douglas is that guy. But I haven't seen a lot out of Gase right now in terms of his coaching, in terms of the preparation for the team week by week.
Well, that's the thing. That's the same thing, though. We're not going to know.
No.
Yes.
I don't think you can say it's always depth
great
because they had
Belichick
enough guys last week
when he got fired from Cleveland. I mean, every coach in the NFL if you take a look at Adam Gase's record too at Miami, he might even be like the most unluckiest coach in the NFL with all the injuries he's had, especially at the quarterback position. The guy has never had a stable quarterback situation in any year that I can recall in Miami or now with the Jets. I can't. And we talked about the whole Gase thing coming into the season about, and he's had a decent amount of people that have played under him, whether it's Peyton Manning, Amendola. We can go on. A lot of people have given him the thumbs up that he knows what he's doing. So I'm not, after this very small sample size, going to critique him one way or another with the mess that's happened and say, oh, yeah, it's mostly his fault. I don't know. Could it be? Sure. He could be part of the problem. But I'm not going to sit here after everything that's gone on with personnel in the first 6 weeks and say he is part of the problem until we give him a little bit more time.
Okay. I mean, it's a fair assessment. I disagree with you somewhat because I do think he has to accept some of the blame.
Agreed.
But the team not necessarily being ready.
Absolutely, they all get to blame.
So that's part of my point here, right? And again, you can kind of maybe give Douglas a wee bit of a pass because he wasn't here and he's working on remediating the roster, which clearly needs a lot more remediation than both you and I thought when the season started. We knew we needed depth. We knew the team needed better depth, especially on the offensive line and on the defensive backfield. But I don't think neither you nor I recognize as to how poor the depth was overall, especially at the skill position. We can go into it. So Robbie Anderson was on the block. You and I spoke last week. They got offered a 4. They wanted a 2. If somebody came to them with a 3, would they have accepted it? It's possible. But I can understand the view of maybe wanting a 2, though I think they were shooting for the moon on that one and maybe should have accepted a 3 to augment the draft picks that they already have. And then on the Leonard Williams, and you and I have talked for a while, the advanced metrics for Williams are a lot better than what we see on the field. And the system that they're using around, it doesn't necessarily make the most of his talents. although he clearly has to be viewed as a disappointment so far after being the 6th overall pick. Maybe he goes to the Giants and Dave Gettleman's system makes him into a star, though you look at all the other defensive linemen there and you wonder whether or not they really had to go ahead and get him. But good for the Jets getting a 3 and a 5. The 5 could be the 3 this year, the 5 the following year. 5 could become a 4 if he resigns there. It was pretty clear and evident that the Jets were not going to resign him. But the one thing I will say, for all the criticism of Leonard Williams, take a look at how well he played when the system was different in terms of collapsing the pocket a little bit. But B, more important, and it's really weird, take a look at that draft. Go up and down the first round of the first several rounds. That draft is pretty ugly in terms of the talent base that ended up in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm okay with the compensation for Williams. I think based on the compensation, I think there was no question they had no interest in bringing him back because they didn't get much. All right, they moved up a little bit more from a compensation pick to where the Giants will be slotted, and they get the potentially 4th-round pick 2 years from now. So it's okay. It's better than what it would have been had they just let him walk on the open market. So it's okay. It's nothing fantastic, but it's okay. It's better than what it would have been. And it was necessary because they had to do something, and I'm sure they'll make some more moves before the draft. They have to continue to add draft picks. I'm sure Joe Douglas, that's what he wants to do. He wants to. That's his specialty. He wants to bring in his own young players, and to do that, you have to have more draft picks.
And as part of that, as you and I have talked a lot about, is clearly adding the right players. As I said, Williams we all thought was going to be the end-all and be-all. Turned out he wasn't. And as I said, the rest of the draft was not particularly phenomenal. I mean, the jury, to a certain extent, is out on Quinnen Williams this year. We'll have to see how he develops. But if you look at the drafts from, 2004 to 2015, 2016 or 17, the lack of retention of talent on this team and the lack of talent overall in terms of how the draft picks has panned out is fairly evident that both when Idzik at the time and also Maccagnan, who I thought was a very good evaluator when he came over, did not do a particularly good job of boosting the coffers in terms of the talent base that's on his team.
And coupled that with injuries to the positions on the team, offensive line and receiver, that were probably the 2 positions that the Jets could not have to deal with those types of injuries. And then throw in the quarterback not being around and playing a 3rd stringer who's no longer even in the NFL. And this is why the Jets are where they are right now and why I cannot grade Adam Gase at this moment in time. Robbie Anderson's situation, as far as him, it's funny that there was a rumor about him going somewhere, and the only reason or the main reason that team, I don't know if it was Dallas, that team did not want to make the deal was because they wouldn't make the deal unless they felt they could re-sign him, and Robbie Anderson wanted too much money. And that's what we've heard. So I kind of understand part of that rumor because that's what we're hearing already about Robbie Anderson wanting money. And this is going to be a good benchmark, a good case for Douglas. Robbie Anderson, there's no way Joe Douglas can give Robbie Anderson anything substantial. I mean, he just can't.
Well, as you said, you said he should get maybe a little more than he's getting now.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, that would be a fair salary based upon the production, but I think part of it also will depend on who else is brought in and where he might fit in terms of the depth chart at wide receiver.
Because Robbie Anderson has to be looked at by this team as the 4th option at best as far as skill position, because you got Herndon, Bell. You want to bring in a number 1. So he's got to be the.
And you also have Crowder in the slot also.
Yeah,
right,
that's why. That's why I said. That's why I said 4th at best. He might even be behind.
Without even considering a number 1 wide receiver as well.
So you got number 1 receiver, Bell, Herndon, and then you have Crowder, and so that's why he would. So that's where you have to pay him as the 4th or 5th priority as far as your skill position talent on the team, and I'm sure he wants to be paid like a number 1, which there's no way Joe Douglas is going to do that, and I'm not sure he'll be around, but we'll see. As far as Darnold, the state of Sam Darnold, I'm not real happy with what I'm seeing from Sam, but I understand it. I understand it at this point so far. I'm not going to go crazy because he's only made, 17 starts. So he's basically just getting past a first full season as a rookie starts-wise. And he's only made 3 starts with the new regime with Gase. And he's only had 2 starts where he hasn't had mono symptoms. And in those 2 starts, he's played behind, as far as the players who were on the field, probably the worst offensive line in the NFL, coupled with the worst skill position receivers in the NFL. So I can't completely throw Sam Darnold under the bus just yet, because I can understand why he would have some issues. There is no question the number one issue he's dealing with right now is his confidence in the pocket. It's so bad. His footwork is terrible. He doesn't step into any throw. And I got to believe it's because he's just, how can you step in or feel confident to step into any throw when the offensive line is completely getting pushed back in your face?
Well, I think you highlighted the key aspect is his footwork. His footwork has been horrific this year. And part of that is something you would have hoped that Gase had worked on with him. But as you also mentioned, a good portion of his regression from a footwork perspective may have to do with the offensive line in front of him and his inability to step up or feel confident in the pocket, making him a bit skittish and changing arm angles and changing footwork. So, with confidence begets success, and with success begets confidence, right? It's a vicious cycle in chicken and egg, but part of that is based upon the offensive line. But he does have to draw some criticism because there are other quarterbacks who deal with poor offensive lines and still are able to make the throws or still maintain their footwork and their framework and their base properly, which is something that has to be worked on. It's something that should be drills that are being worked on constantly with him if they're not. And he does have to draw a certain amount of criticism, even though the team in front of him hasn't played well. He hasn't helped in that regard with some of the picks that he's thrown and some of the missed throws that he's made.
Yeah, and that's why I go back to not just 17 starts, but I'm just going to give an example of the quarterback they played last week, Gardner Minshew. Minshew, late round guy. Look, he's playing probably statistically better than Darnold. And there's a lot of other reasons why that's the case. But just keep in mind that Gardner Minshew was a fifth-year player that had a ton of starts, and he is, and to throw in with the fact that he's playing for a team that has a stable offensive line and a very good running game and more skill position talent at receiver. So and he's on this is the other thing that we kind of lose sight of. He's on a team where the coaching staff has been there for several years. The foundation's there. Darnold is in a situation where not only has he only made 17 career starts, he was the youngest quarterback starter in the league last year. He's still extremely young for the position. And he's in a situation that he's learning and trying to learn with an organization, front office, all the way down to coaching staff that is all new. Everybody's new, all the new players, new scheme, everything, mono, injuries. It's not a surprise that we're getting some of this bad play, and it's also not a surprise that we could see him making good plays like he did in the Dallas game. So I think this is just one of those situations, unfortunately. They got to get Beachum back, first of all, so we can have some semblance of an offensive line. I think when we do that, if Beachum gets back and we can have a halfway, like maybe the 24th best offensive line instead of the worst, then I think we'll start seeing a little bit better. I hope we'll see a little bit better performance out of him.
I will agree with you to an extent. I'll agree that he's learning a new system. He's adapting to a new system, a coaching staff, infrastructure, everything. But in game, you look at last week, right? 2 plays kind of highlight what happened. He avoids the sack or avoids the pressure and throws a pick.
Stupid. Yeah, bad
pass. Minshew avoids the sack and throws a 70-yard touchdown pass to Conley, right? So it's kind of hard not to compare and contrast the two, regardless of the experience that Minshew has. Then also, and again, I know you're not going to like the comparison, you kind of look at what Daniel Jones has done and as a first-year starter and maybe a better system or better talent offensively around him to a certain extent, even though Sterling Shepard is out. Jones has had his difficulties, but he's also been made plays. Even last week, he was getting the holy heck beat out of him, yet he was able to make plays in the pocket. So, I can only give him a pass so long for Darnold of new system and how many starts he's made and a second-year starter really in a system as opposed to, let's say, Jones, who played all 4 years at Duke, or Minshew played all 4 or 5 years at his college.
Daniel Jones was coached under. So that's
agree.
That's why it's just too early.
There's lots of factors, but it's very hard not to basically view Darnold in a slightly different light, and you need to have him show you more. Not
Yeah,
saying
but
that I'm
haven't you seen
concerned about
more?
Darnold
It's
yet.
not that Sam
You've
Darnold
seen,
hasn't done
yeah, but
anything
then
for the past year
wait,
and a half.
but
He's made
I
plays.
agree, but he's also had lots of
All right, but
again.
at the end
You
of
guys,
last season,
lots of.
didn't he look awfully good?
He did last
Okay,
season.
and
He
then
did.
he starts this season.
So you have to be concerned about regression also.
Well, again, he starts this. Well, see, I'm not going to get into thinking negatively. I'm going to get just thinking reality. Reality is, last 5 games of the season, he came on, was playing well as he got more experience. First game this season, he gets mono and sets him back for 4 or 5 games. And then I just mentioned everything else you throw in there. So, and remember, he had a pretty good game against Dallas, and then a bad game this past week. So it's not that he's had 7 bad
game
games.
the week before.
So, yeah, well, the New England game is the New England game. So, I mean, that's
Well,
just...
I mean, but you can't. But
Why?
you
Oh,
can't,
Daniel
you can't,
Jones
you
looked
can't
really
use,
good against the Patriots, didn't he?
But again, I'm not arguing. But I'm also saying we also have to take everything combined, right? You can't say you
All
can't
right, well, what is
excuse
your,
X
okay,
but
what
not
is your
excuse
point,
Y.
then?
My point is that there has to be a level of concern to a certain extent that neither you, that I at least I'll say I haven't necessarily seen the progress that I would like to see out of him in terms
How much
of
of a level
being
of
able
concern?
to. If it was 10%, let's say before, and I'm using numbers, it's 15
No, on a scale
or
of
20
1
now.
to 10.
A 4.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Yeah, you're talking like it's an
I
8.
haven't hit DEFCON
Well,
2 yet, right? But
No. Scale
the
of
more
1 to
games where he
10,
struggles,
10 being the worst.
right? But I'm saying is if
If
he
you're at
continues
4,
to
you're not
struggle
even
and
at
you
the midway
don't
point,
see,
so that's fine. But I'm just saying, that's the reason I wanted to ask that question.
it's ratcheting
That's
up little by
okay.
little.
That's the reason I wanted to ask the question. Because you're acting like it's 8, but you just said 4.
Okay.
So that's
Okay,
fine.
but
We're on
again,
the same page, but you're taking, as usual, I'm sorry, but you
as
are.
usual. Okay.
You're taking the approach a little bit more like you're just a little bit more freaked out over it than I am. I just think we need to be a little bit more patient.
I'm not freaked out. I am more. Patience is a wonderful thing and it's a virtue, and I have plenty of it. The problem is when that patience ends, right? And you have there. Look, you can be a Cub fan and have patience forever until you win, and it's wonderful when you win and you feel the exhilaration as somebody who's won, right?
What do you think could possibly happen over the next few weeks? Because I honestly, if
nothing's
Beecham,
going to happen.
Whoa,
I
you don't
want
even
to
know my
see some
question.
progress.
If Beecham isn't playing this week, I don't even know if he is. Let's say he's not. Let's say it's the same offensive line this week. Same everything. What do you expect him to do? Even with the Dolphins, give me like a game that you would say that you're expecting from him this week.
Let's say 22 of 30, 31, 275 yards and a couple of touchdowns.
You know, I would look at that as which is almost like the Dallas game. I would look at that as he could reach that. If he was 18 of 32, a touchdown and a pick, for 230 yards.
I would call that a bad game.
Yeah, sure. But I would say that that's actually, I wouldn't be floored. With this offensive
but that's a bad
line,
game.
I am not, because I can't go into any game against any team with this offensive line and expect much. I just can't.
Look, I mean, Miami didn't play badly against Pittsburgh against a backup quarterback. Now,
that's my point.
Now, again, but if you look at the numbers, Rudolph came into the game with a 6 yards per attempt. He ended up with over 14 per completion against
better
Miami.
Offensive line.
The offensive line wasn't particularly great in that game.
In that game,
he was
then I
getting
guess
hit.
we're in trouble.
He wasn't.
Because
again, I don't know how good.
if they got hit by the Dolphins,
James
with that
Conner
offensive
went
line,
nuts, right? So you'd kind of hope that maybe we see the same out of Le'Veon Bell in terms of the running game.
That's the thing. I don't see with the offensive line that's been out there. I can't see Le'Veon Bell against any team getting any holes. I'm sorry, I just can't.
Well, let me question this way: I'll put it this way: does the quarterback or the skill players have to be able to make up when the offensive line isn't perfect?
Absolutely.
Okay.
First of all,
haven't
we
seen
don't
that
have
yet, though.
any skill players other than Le'Veon Bell. We don't have any receivers that we can count on.
Well, I mean, hopefully we actually see Herndon
Let's
this
hope.
week, but you never know.
That would be big. And look, it's nice that Griffin showed that if he's got a couple more years left in the tank, that he'll be a good complement and a number 2 which is, I mean, hey, we have Chris Herndon and a number
Well,
two like Ryan Griffin. That's something to feel positive about with hopefully Wesco getting some opportunities.
That's what I was going to say. When are we ever seeing
Yeah,
Wesco?
that's the other thing. We got to see Wesco get the opportunities towards the end of the season, so that works into it. You know, I like what I see out of Vincent Smith. It's a small sample size, but he hasn't dropped anything. So and you know, it's a small.
Well, if you're concerned about the offensive line, right? Wesco was the guy you and I both thought would be able to be that extra offensive lineman to be able to create some holes to give Bell running room.
He's young. That's the thing. Apparently, he's not picking things up. That's not good. So,
Nope.
but yeah, I'm happy to see that a small school prospect like Vincent Smith has pretty much caught everything in his power, and because of that, that's a nice sign. That's what we have to kind of look at. We got because that's why I was saying I'm not for the next 2 months. It's going to be about all right. What players now? Maybe at the end of the season, we see Kyron Brown. Maybe we see Blesson Austin get on the field. We see the development of Kyle Phillips, who's having a nice season so far, and he'll get more playing time, of course, with Leonard Williams out. And maybe we'll get some more of these players in the practice squad and some other, Terrell Basham. So this is what we're going to be dealing with this season is finding out and hoping that some of these younger players can get better. So Joe Douglas knows exactly what he needs to get done in order to make sure that this team can actually be a playoff team next year or compete for the playoffs as long as Sam Darnold doesn't catch mono again.
Well, it's going to be, as we've talked about, unfortunately, the last couple of years. It's seeing who remains and seeing who gets purged in the offseason.
All right, well, we will see. The Dolphins, boy, what an ugly game. I can't believe I got to watch it. So can you watch it for me?
If I must.
I don't know. That's just going to be pretty sad to watch. And I'm sorry, it wouldn't surprise me if the Jets lost at all. It just wouldn't. I could see Ryan Fitzpatrick having a big game.
Against his old team? Why not? They were up 14-0 again until Fitzpatrick threw a horrific pick at the end of the first half and changed the whole.
Yeah, that was a nice defensive call by the Dolphins at the end of the first half. They blitzed on 3rd and 20. That was nice at midfield.
That made sense for a 45-yard touchdown.
That was really good. Hopefully they'll be able to do something like that against us. But
we'd have to catch the ball and make sure the ball gets there on time. So
that too. All right, so we'll see how it all works out. And what's after Miami?
I don't even remember anymore. I think I blocked it out of my mind purposely.
So I know it's an easy game.
It's unfortunate to say that.
It's an easier opponent.
It's unfortunate to say that, but I think that's kind of where you and I both are.
It's probably like the Bengals or something, or Washington.
It's a very.
Or the Giants.
I'm actually getting into this.
The Giant game is probably.
The Giants I think are a couple of weeks after that.
So
I think the Giants are a couple of weeks after that. So. I should probably know the schedule, and it's probably not great, but given
it's
how we've
Bengals,
played so far, it's
Dolphins, Giants, and Redskins. I think are kind of on that next 4 or 5 games. So, but like
it's as you said, it's Dolphins this week. Oh, it is Giants the following week. I'm sorry,
Giants
correct.
Next week. Okay.
Then Giants, Redskins, Raiders, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens, Steelers,
Well,
Bills.
look, the good news is we'll continue to have.
On paper, we thought this was the easy part of the schedule, and if they'd come in, let's say 3 and 4 or whatever, we'd be in a good state. But clearly, we're not even remotely close to that right now.
Unfortunately, right now we're also in that situation like we were last year, which is why we're not going to be doing this every week again. Which is we're already rooted. We're going to start rooting for good performances from Darnold and Bell and so forth, and probably losing games. Hey, we lost? That's all right. I don't mind. Better draft pick status. And that's unfortunate. We're going to have to deal with that again, and we're not even at the midway point of the season yet. All right, Jan, appreciate your time. Enjoy the game. Can I say that? Enjoy the game?
Sure, why not?
All right, enjoy the game. We'll talk to you soon. Not next week.
Sounds good.
Unless something happens.
No.
So take care.
Right.